Hello, I'm Sarah Jensen, editor of OEM Off-Highway, and welcome to Design and Engineering Insights. Today, I'll be speaking with the Lubrizol Corporation about the impacts of emissions regulations on lubricants. Thank you for joining me today, gentlemen.
Thank you very much for having us today.
Thanks for introduction. Yep.
So how, if at all, have emissions regulations impacted lubricants that are used in heavy-duty on and off-highway vehicles and equipment?
So it's a great question, and I think if you look back, so in the commercial vehicle and equipment landscape, emissions have been progressively regulated for a number of years now, and this is the case for both on and off-highway vehicles and equipment, as you mentioned. As emissions have tightened over that kind of 2-decade window in terms of the legislation and the requirements that OEMs have to meet, one of the things we've really seen is significant changes to OEM hardware design, as well as a lot more focus on introducing exhaust gas aftertreatment systems. Now, in terms of the lubricant, one way that you can categorize a lubricant is by the level of SAPs, and SAPs refers to something known as sulfated ash, phosphorus, and sulfur content in a lubricant. And in a moment, Denis is going to talk through kind of a timeline of how those off-highway emission standards have had an impact in terms of what came when and what that means for lubrication. But if you look at how off-highway emissions are regulated in the European market today, they're regulated using something called the stage standards. And in North America, people will be familiar with what's known as the tier standards. So I think tier 4 final is the latest for North America.
Yep.
For Europe, we saw stage 1 introduced all the way back in 1999. So, what's that, 21 years ago now, 22 years ago. And now we fast forward to 2021, we're all the way up to stage 5, which hopefully a lot of people will now be more and more familiar with. And before I hand over to Denis, I think the key thing for me is that the stage standards over that 20-year window have really driven the quality levels of the heavy-duty diesel engine oils that we see in the market space, because they're required to protect after-treatment devices, but also alongside the emissions legislation, owner-operators have higher demands now than maybe they did 20 years ago in terms of how long the machinery has to operate for. And there's a number of other challenges that OEMs face beyond just the emissions. So the lubricant plays a really important role in providing that protection.
Yeah, and like if you look from the hardware perspective, I wouldn't go very deep into the past, but like with introduction of stage 3B in 2006, that led to wide use of diesel particulate filters, which are designed to catch particles generated during the combustion. And in order to prevent the blockage of these filters, lubricant with lower ash levels, as Matt mentions, are required. And then in around 2011, the introduction of stage 4 led to widespread use of selective catalytic reductions for the new off-highway equipment. And SCR units are sensitive to high level of phosphorus, which can poison the catalyst. And in order to prevent those from happening, the correct lubricant should be used with lower levels of phosphorus eventually. And then finally, we hit the stage 5 in 2019. And the concentration of DPFs is set to a higher limit. And the standard also brought the scope of the equipment power ratings covered, so it has a wider range of equipment covered within it. And it also tightened the limits for particular numbers and particular matters. And that means that nowadays for off-highway, almost all range of off-highway equipment, the DPFs are essential. And this would accelerate the existing trend for the OEMs to specify and to owners to use low SAPs lubricant. And this will increase the demand for high-performing lubricants on the off-highway market.
Could you maybe talk a little bit about how Lubrizol has gone about developing its lubricants to meet evolving emissions regulations? Maybe what new developments there have been that or were necessary to meet current emissions regulations?
Of course, and I think if we look back in time again, it's a fair comment that Lubrizol has a lot of formulating experience in lower SAPS additive development and lubricant design, and a lot of that comes from the initial on-highway application. So as on-highway equipment such as trucks and buses began incorporating a lot of these after-treatment devices, it really drove the development of this technology at Lubrizol. And we have great in-house global testing resources, an expert technical development team, and we work very, very closely with our OEM partners and our customers over that time span. So for well over a decade, we've supported customers through the development of a number of innovative low and mid SAP solutions for these applications with after-treatment devices fitted to equipment. And in terms of, if we look at the low SAPS lubricant market, so, technology that has or provides that lower level of sulfated ash, phosphorus, and sulfur in the lubricant, there's a number of very specific OEM and industry approvals associated to that kind of technology. And these OEM approvals and industry specifications, they're not static, they evolve over time. So over that kind of 10-year, over a decade window, we've been continuously working to make sure that we have technology that not only kind of provides that sulfated ash, phosphorus, and sulfur requirement, but also goes above and beyond the minimum requirements of the OEMs and the industry baselines as well. Did you have anything else to add, Denis, to this?
Oh, yeah, I would just say, more than sure, beyond SAPS levels, there are a number of parameters are considered, and their piston cleanliness, oxidization performance, and all the things which a common lubricant has to look after.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And are there any special considerations OEMs should keep in mind when selecting lubricants for use in their vehicle or equipment designs to ensure emissions compliance?
The OEM equipment is already carefully designed to meet the stage 5 emission compliance, because that's already on the market. And as a result, of course, more equipment fitted with advanced after-treatment devices such DPF and CRS will be on the market in order to comply those requirements, the stage 5 emission limits. And to assure that this hardware operates as planned, and to avoid the unplanned maintenance downtimes from blocked filters or poisoned catalyst or damaged sensors, OEMs are specifying the lubricants with these low levels of sulfated ash, phosphorus, and sulfur. So that will be typically 1% or less of sulfated ash and either 1,200 ppm of phosphorus in the case of E9, E11 level of performance and less than 800 ppm for E6, E8, depending on hardware, of course.
Yeah, and I think so. In terms of the way that lubricants are specified now for a lot of off-highway OEMs and engine manufacturers, there's quite a strong emphasis today on SEER E9 and API CK4, which, in terms of lubricant standards are very well known, as well as a number of very specific OEM approvals that I mentioned earlier. And E9 and CK4 are what we would describe as mid-SAP, so they have a slightly higher phosphorus level that Denis mentioned. For the on-highway truck market, one thing that stands out to me is there's much more emphasis on the use of what we would call a low SAPS oil. So that would align with something known as a SEER E6 and soon to be upgraded to E8 with the industry baseline, alongside API CK4 in most cases. And the benefit of potentially consider in this longer term from an OEM perspective is that, these type of lubricants typically provide a higher level of durability protection whilst providing that after treatment maintenance and prolongation of life through the SAPS level. So you're almost getting the best of both worlds when you move to a SEER E8 or E6 today, because you're having that enhanced durability and cleanliness, whilst providing protection to the after treatment systems and opening up other avenues to explore low viscosity grades as well for fuel efficiency.
And what part could lubricants play in helping manufacturers maybe further reduce emissions or maybe meet future emissions regulations?
It's another great question. And I think a lot of the focus we've talked about today and really the focus of the stage emissions has been around reducing particulates, reducing NOx emissions. But beyond that, the lubricant can play a really important role in improving engine efficiency. And one way to do this is by evaluating low viscosity lubricants. And today in passenger car and the on-road trucking markets, an SAE 5W30 and even lower than that when we get into the lower HJHS viscosity grades are increasingly used in order to gain fuel economy benefits. And today for those markets, the main driver is a fairly well planned out emission strategy from the European regulatory committees, alongside a much wider awareness of climate change, I think, by owner operators and the expectation of end users. So there's potential here for future evaluation of low viscosity grades for the off-highway OEMs to follow a similar route, I think.
I would add on top of that, yes, of course, for off-highway equipment today, heavier grades are commonly used, including like 10W40s or 15W40s. And adoption of lower viscosity lubricants can improve the fuel economy, reduce the total cost of ownership as a result, and of course, improving the carbon footprint of the fleet owners without any compromise in the equipment protection or durability of the engine. And OEM handbooks are often give the several viscosity grade options alongside with the required approvals they need today and so on, assuring that the engine is protected. However, the focus on the CO2 reduction is quite big today, as well as for OEM, and there is no doubt that the low viscosity lubricant will help to reduce the CO2 footprint for everyone. And of course, accent on the importance of the formula approved lubricants, and I see E8 CK4 style lubricant will also offer enhanced durability and protection, and this is prolonging the after treatment device while the SAPS level is low, and this will kind of also multiply the efficiency gain from the low viscosity lubricant because the after treatment system is within the life, and the also low level of SAPs will enable OEMs to use the smaller after treatment devices. It makes them lighter. You're carrying less weight. You reduce the CO2. So the efficiency gains are there. There are now options on the market available with 10W40s, 10W30s down to 5W30s paired with the proper low SAPs requirements that will help everyone in the both in CO2 and the emissions.
Okay, great. And so how does the company maybe see lubricants evolving in the coming years? Are there any new challenges or that they might need to address, or are there maybe new opportunities for use of lubrications and heavy duty on and off highway applications?
Yes, I think again, it's another fair comment that I think it's definitely a period of significant change in the commercial vehicle and equipment landscape today. I think we've touched upon a number of things, but really there's a lot of pressure for OEMs to reduce emissions and increase efficiency, as well as adopt other things such as alternative fuels as a means to do that. And I know Denis will comment on that in a moment, but I think in summary, we always talk about three market drivers, and they are efficiency, emissions, and durability. And ultimately, over that 20-year window we've been talking about, these categories ultimately remain exactly the same, but the things within them continue to evolve and change. And that's where the challenges arise. I think durability has always been front and center as the main priority for OEMs and the expectation of their customers as well. But over that 20-year period, emissions and efficiency have been so much more in focus that the role of the lubricant is now very, very, very broad. And it has to protect after treatment, provide efficiency gains, and continue to deliver that durability. And I think the first two categories we talked about, emissions and efficiency, are going to remain front and center for the next 5 to 10 years. So things will have to evolve and change over time.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I can only reflect Matt's comments, and I wouldn't see any changes in the reducing or removing those two first market drivers. The one thing which is now ongoing discussion topic in the industry is the use of alternative fuels, such, for example, as hydrogen, H2, as internal combustion power source. So this is one of the example how lubricant may need to adapt in order to provide the correct protection of the equipment, because H2 burns less stable, it burns hotter, and it produces a lot of water, and that all challenges for the lubricant to take care of in the future. And off-highway market is sort of sometimes following the on-highway one, but modern high-performance engine lubricants today offer a lot of for OEMs and fleet operators and fleet owners, and they continue to adopt those changes which we see on the market. Yeah, that's definitely.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you both for joining me today and providing some insight into current emissions regulations and lubricants and how they're kind of working together. I appreciate it.